Oh, what's going on, guys? Gamer Dude back once again, and today we are back with another debate video. But before we begin, you'll know the routine, or at least I hope you do by now. If you are new to the channel, please make sure you smash that like button and drop me a subscribe, because it would just be your good deed of the day. Same applies if you are a returning viewer. Now then, with Marvel Spider-Man 2 coming up to its 1 month anniversary, I want to talk about the future of this game and where it's going in terms of DLC, a potential half game that Sony seems fond of doing now, and leading into the eventual Spider-Man 3. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about what I think is going to happen. Take it all with a pinch of salt. None of it's being announced. None of it's being confirmed. This is just my theory. I'm throwing that out there right off the bat to avoid people saying, oh, well, you've said this is happening when it's not happening. No, I'm not saying anything's happening. I'm just spitballing here. Right then, first of all, I want to start off with the DLC. Now, I'm thinking DLC number 1 will feature the Chameleon. Simply to finish that whole Kraven story arc after we heard those audio messages from those hunter bases as well. Because Chameleon was heavily teased in the first game. It was that brief bit of dialogue with Spider-Man thinking someone was impersonating him. He says, oh, mate, I think it's the Chameleon again. And it turned out to be that dude in the Spider-Man costume fighting those Fisk goons, and he's like, yeah, I'm never putting this fake Spidey suit on again, blah blah blah. And then of course Chameleon appears in the second Spider-Man game, turning out to be Kraven's half-brother, and it's heavily teased there that he's going to have some big involvement at some point down the line. So that's just my theory on the first DLC. The second DLC, Carnage. Now this is a no-brainer, because the symbiote storyline needs to come to a conclusion before the third game, since there's absolutely no way Peter can keep that anti-venom suit, because it just makes him simply too OP, and he'd literally obliterate any villains such as the obviously teased Green Goblin and Doc Ock. Now, DLC number 3, something smaller. I'm thinking it might have something to do with setting up for Silk. Setting up a Goblin emergence, setting up a raft prison break for the Good Doctor, and I think it could have the potential to introduce Hydro Man for the third game, or for a half game, so we've got a nice trio of villains to fight in the third game. So moving on to the half game, in theory, if there's another half game, I don't think it's going to be centered around Miles Morales. Considering Insomniac have said Miles is now the primary Spidey going forward, it's likely he'll just be in Spider-Man 3 as the primary character. I think if there is a spin-off game, it'll center around either Venom, having him as a playable character with a similar size story to the Miles Morales game, which could potentially set up Flash Thompson as Venom, and then, in the end, set up Flash Thompson as Agent Venom. Now, I say Flash because Eddie Brock does not technically canonically exist in this universe, whereas Flash does. Now, Eddie has been name-dropped, but not by any characters. If you look at the collectibles from the first Spider-Man game on Peter's backpack collectibles, in the goodbye card and good luck card he got from leaving the Daily Bugle, it is signed by Eddie Brock. But that is the only mention of Eddie Brock. And I'm pretty sure Insomniac have said that, they don't want to include Eddie Brock. Now, I say Flash Thompson because he's had a significant involvement, especially in Spider-Man 2. Now, in the first Spider-Man game, Flash Thompson was mentioned in a brief piece of dialogue in Feast. It's by one of the homeless flyers in Feast. Peter says, my good buddy Flash. So he was there. And in Spider-Man 2, of course, during the flashback scenes, you get that cardboard cutout of Flash Thompson. Peter and Harry are talking about Flash. So it would seem to me that if Insomniac were going to do this half game with Venom, that they should just have Flash in it, because Flash has been Agent Venom in certain renditions of Spider-Man before. Or, alternatively, the spin-off game could center around Silk, who was introduced at the end of the game and has essentially identical powers to Peter Parker's Spider-Man because she was bitten by the same spider that gave Peter his powers. Now, this game would definitely have a similar vibe to the Miles Morales game. She's a spider in training, just this time from Miles, and she has to deal with the emergence or the fallout of these new villains and deal with a breakout at the Raft, which will lead to the events of Spider-Man 3 with, Doc Ock. And Miles will help her deal with all this. Now, moving on to Spider-Man 3, of course, this is years away. We're probably talking 2027, 2028 before Spider-Man 3 comes out, but again, I'm just spitballing here. Main villains, Goblin. Absolutely. Obvious. Totally set up. We know that's coming. I mean, it kind of has to be. Especially if this might be the end of Peter Parker's story. It has to be done with Goblin. We have to have Peter Parker fighting Goblin. Kingpin. Now, hear me out on this one. Kingpin, yes, he was in the first game, but he was in it for 10 minutes. You fight him, and although he is kind of a difficult boss, it's still a little bit too easy. It's still over a little bit too quickly. And then, other than that brief scene in Miles Morales, he's not seen or heard from again. I mean, unless you count Craven's map of New York showing Wilson Fisk's face, he's not really mentioned at all in Spider-Man 2. I mean, yeah, we have the new Fisk Tower, but that's it. It's like Wilson Fisk was just completely absent for Spider-Man 2. Now, unless they decide to do something with the DLC with Fisk, he's just been completely absent. So I would love to see Fisk return as a main villain in Spider-Man 3. Hydro Man. After his potential emergence and setup in this half game or in the DLC, I think he should be a main opening villain. And it would be similar to the Sandman encounter in the second game's opening. Think of it. The second game opens with fighting an elemental. And then the third game opens with fighting an elemental. That would be so cool. I mean, of course they couldn't do it in the first Spider-Man because they wanted to go with that whole Wilson Fisk and the city falling apart because he was gone, but still, I think this would be a cool way to open the game because the Sandman fight was just so dope for an opening to a game. So imagine it with Hydro Man. Instead of sand flooding the city literally gets flooded this time around. That'd be so dope. I'd love to see that. Doc Ock, of course, again, no-brainer. Doc Ock is definitely coming back, and we could potentially see a superior Spider-Man vibe coming off of this. Because if you think about it, Doc Ock said something about the future or the final chapter, and then in the shadows at the end of that post-credit scene, it kind of looked like Spider-Man's eye lenses on Doc Ock's face. If you look back and watch it, you will see that the shadows on Doc Ock's face kind of look like Spider-Man's eye lenses. So maybe we'll get a superior Spider-Man situation, and that leads into Peter Parker either dying or getting his body back somehow, and then it leads into a Spider-Man No More situation where he's like, right, I'm done. The Doc completely destroyed my reputation as Spider-Man. Miles, you're up. Take the reins. I'm retiring. That would be a nice way to end Peter's story, I think, and kind of bring it full circle for that whole Doc Ock thing. Now, Taskmaster. I want to see Taskmaster return. I didn't enjoy the whole drone thing around Taskmaster in the first game, following those drones around the city, and it was the same with the Hunter bases, that it was essentially just a copy and paste, following those drones around the city. I didn't enjoy that, but I really did actually enjoy the Taskmaster storyline. And I would love to see him return as a side villain. Even if you look at Marvel's Avengers, he was still kind of a formidable opponent. And the fact that he has the ability to like mimic and adapt to all types of combat would be really interesting to see, especially with him fighting against Miles. Like, I would love to see how he would like counteract Miles's venom, how he would figure out a counter for that. And I would really like to see that, because he fought Taskmaster fought Peter in the first game, so now if Miles is going to be taking center stage, he's got to fight Miles. He's got to come back. And someone hired Taskmaster to fight Peter's Spider-Man, and to like recruit Peter's Spider-Man. So now we have to have that possibility that someone else has done the same for the Miles Spider-Man. Again, that's just me spitballing. Another villain who I'd like to see return is Wraith. But this time, she's become such a big problem that needs to be dealt with due to her being, well, kind of murdery. So this being the case, either Miles or Peter or Silk, if she's introduced, have to come to the tough decision. Even though Wraith is technically trying to help, she's doing it in the wrong way, and she needs to be brought to justice. And it's a problem that needs to be solved by either of the spiders, and they have to take her down. I mean, yeah, we fight her in Spider-Man 2, but Peter lets her go. And I must admit, I was playing it on the hardest difficulty, and I struggled in that fight with Wraith. Peter is superpowered, and Wraith has just this, like, sigh on a chain. And she was hella difficult to beat. I had trouble beating her. So I would love to see Wraith return as a big side villain. Now, the final villain I would like to see is Morbius. Now, Morbius should have like a huge side story, maybe a couple of, bases similar to the New Form bases in the Miles game, where you've got to find out all the, intel from all these labs and take out a bunch of enemies in between. Maybe they're Oscorp labs. But this side story will lead to a boss encounter, but he will obviously be a side villain. Like, if you wanted to, he could be one of the last side villains, because it's one of those that I'm talking about that has to be done where it's like done through the whole game. It's one of those side missions that's stretched out through the whole game. Like, you do some of it, and then you stop to do some other bits. Like, it's locked until you get to a certain point in the game, and then you unlock the next bit, etc., etc. No Screwball. Just please, God, do not bring back Screwball. I swear to God, if they bring back Screwball, I am done. I am done with Spider-Man if they bring back Screwball. I want nothing to do with Screwball. But yeah, if the DLC, in theory, is similar to how it was in the first game, then maybe it will focus only on one villain throughout 3 chapters, much like The City That Never Sleeps focused on Hammerhead and the Mafia. Now, if they were going to do it this way, I would definitely pick Chameleon for that, since there's very interesting stories Insomniac can tell with him, and then, save the half game for ending the symbiote story arc and introducing Silk. But then again, alternatively for the half game, assuming they are going to be doing this again, it could be an original take on the Maximum Carnage story, featuring Miles and Silk. And maybe, just maybe, Miles finally gets his symbiote. And, we get a symbiote variant for Miles. That'd be so cool. But you see, I'm saying this because Carnage might be too big to be used for DLC. But as I said earlier, the Peter Parker anti-Venom suit and symbiote storyline really does need to be finished and done with before 3 is released. Then again, all of this could be entirely wrong. And we could have 3 DLCs which focus solely on Chameleon, and possibly a few extra filler events, like, as I mentioned, setting up for Silk, Goblin, Doc Ock Prison Break, potentially Hydro Man's debut, throwing in some bases to take down relating to Oscorp or the remaining hunters and symbiotes in the city. And this is where Peter will ditch the anti-venom suit, potentially giving it to Harry to save his life, considering anti-venom has all the perks of the Venom symbiote, just without sending you banana balls. Then back to the half game, it could feature Miles and Silk having to deal with Carnage as the big main bad, potentially having Miles don his own version of a symbiote. Silk has to talk him down, much like Miles had to do with Peter, and Silk, turns to Peter for this. Peter's like, you helped me when I was in a bad spot, I'm doing the same for you, blah, 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 kind of deal. Now, doing this with some side villains thrown in that are exclusive to Silk and Miles would make for an absolutely awesome game. But you see, I would really kind of want a Carnage DLC to be in the main game, because I really want to see that Spider Carnage suit variant for Peter and not Miles. I think it was a mistake on their part giving Miles that Spider Carnage suit variant, the Absolute Carnage one, instead of Peter, because I would love to see that, especially from the 90s cartoon, because that Spider Carnage suit was absolutely menacing. I watched that when I was, I don't know, maybe 6 years old, and I had nightmares from that suit. I had nightmares from that episode. It was crazy how cool that suit was. It appeared in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 game, the Andrew Garfield one, and I loved it. I must have played the entire game so many times wearing that specific suit, because, it turned out I was scared of it when I was a kid, but when I got older, I realized the awesomeness of it. But of course, that's not all coming from Insomniac. We have the incoming Wolverine game, which is confirmed to be set in the Insomniac Spider-Man universe. So anything can come from that. We could get some X-Men spin-off games. They could do, they could do a full X-Men game, which would be dope, considering the last X-Men game we had was that god-awful X-Men Destinies game, which absolutely sucked and failed. I mean, sure, you could create your own mutant character, but it absolutely sucked. It was trash, basically. There's also the inclusion of the Baxter Building in Spider-Man 2, which hints the Fantastic Four also exist in this universe, so we could get a Fantastic Four game from Insomniac Games, which again would be super cool because it would be their own take on it and not a movie tie-in. Like, if you think about it, if these games were made back in the day, they would all be movie tie-ins, because say if Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse were made back in 2007, 2008, they'd probably make a movie tie-in version of it. Same with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Instead of the Raimi trilogy, we would have got the Holland trilogy in game form, and I think they would have sucked. I think it would have taken the element of the game away, and we wouldn't have gotten what Insomniac have delivered to us. And in my opinion, Insomniac should just take the reins for all future Marvel games and possibly give us a newer version of the Marvel's Avengers game, considering the last one from Square Enix was also a heaping pile of trash and failed to live up to any and all expectations whatsoever. Because let's not forget, we also have these other Marvel games coming from other development studios. We've got an Iron Man game coming from EA. We've got that Captain America and Black Panther thing set in World War II coming from Ubisoft, I think it is. So correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about that, but I do think that's from Ubisoft. But yeah, if those games do fail, then it really does need to be handed over to Insomniac. Because although Square Enix did a good job with Guardians of the Galaxy, because Avengers fell so hard, Guardians of the Galaxy didn't really sell that well, and they decided to just be done with that and not make any more games based around that universe. So that really does like sting a little, because ever since Telltale Games Guardians of the Galaxy, which was fantastic, of course, because Telltale Games, there hadn't been anything in that genre. And then, of course, we get this new Guardians of the Galaxy game from Square Enix, and everyone's like, oh, it's Square Enix, it's going to be as bad as the Marvel's Avengers. And everybody hated it because of Avengers giving it such a bad name. And again, I would really like for Insomniac just to do all this and slam it all into one universe. You know, you've got the MCU; it's all slammed into one universe. Do an Insomniac gaming universe, an IGU, where all these Marvel characters are now slammed into the same universe because Wolverine's in the same universe. You know, again, you could have the Fantastic Four with the inclusion of Wolverine. You could have the X-Men. There's so much potential. I mean, there's even rumors circulating that a Daredevil DLC is coming, or potentially even a Daredevil game, which opens up the Punisher. You know, you can do so much with it, and if Insomniac had the chance, I believe they could do anything they wanted. But yeah, then that's just about it. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. Once again, if you aren't new to the channel, please make sure you smash that like button and drop me a subscribe, because it would just be your good deed of the day. Same applies if you are a returning viewer. So do stay tuned for future content. I'm going to be doing a few more live streams here and there, some more informative gaming news videos, because you guys seem to like those. And of course, please, once again, do take this video with a pinch of salt. It's just me spitballing. None of this is true. None of it's been confirmed. I'm just speaking from conveyed rumors and my own theories thrown in before people start saying, oh, you've said this is happening and it's not happening. I'm not saying anything's happening. I'm just theorizing. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you all for stopping by. Really do appreciate it. This has been Gamer Dude. Happy gaming. And I will catch you all in the next one, guys.